Hi everyone, this is Mr. Trio and I'm very excited that you're joining me for History IGCSE. I've prepared this short video to go over all the different components of the program and essentially use this as a tool and a reminder as we get into the program why we're focusing on different things at different times. So there's just basic information that I want to share with you. One of the things that you may know is that the IGCSE program lasts for 2 years. So your year 10 and your year 11, essentially we will be studying the same subject material. The second is that this is a history program that focuses primarily on the 20th century. So we're not going to be talking about ancient Rome or Greece. We're not going to be talking about the Renaissance or all those other fun topics. Primarily, we focus on the 20th century with a particular focus on how these issues are still a major part of our lives today. And last but not least, one of the things that you may know is that the IGCSE program is designed specifically in order to help you become a better writer. The examinations that we have for this particular program, there's no multiple choice, there's no matching, there are no drawings that you can do. This is all essay writing. So at the end of year 11, you will be a strong writer, being able to do short essays, critical analysis, advanced opinion-based essays, and also source analysis. So today's presentation is broken into 3 parts: the syllabus, the assessments, and evaluation. The first part, the syllabus, is the information in which we will be studying. And the information that we study is broken into 2 parts: core studies and depth studies. The assessments come in 4 different forms: component 1, 2, 3, and 4. Often these are all referred to as paper 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of these different assessments has a different point of view, so we'll go over that. And then finally, I'm going to talk to you briefly about how these different components are evaluated and how you can get the best score in each. So let's talk about the syllabus first, just as a behind the scenes to help you get along. When you see the icon, which is the circle here, this refers to the core studies of our syllabus. And when you see the box, that means depth studies. It's just there in the presentation to help you remember which section we are talking about. So let's get with it. The core studies covers the 100 years of the 20th century from 1901 all the way to the year 2000. And the core studies is broken into different topics. The first is, were the peace treaties treaties of 1919 to 1923 fair? These are the peace treaties that took place right after the First World War. Second topic is, to what extent was the League of Nations a success? Third, why had international peace collapsed by 1939? Who was to blame for the Cold War? How effectively did the USA contain the spread of communism? How secure was the USSR's control over Eastern Europe, 1948 to 1989? And why did the events of the Gulf matter, 1970 to 2000? Now, we will be looking at all of these topics from the peace treaties at the very beginning to the Gulf matters towards the end. Keep in mind, we cover this over a 2-year period. So it can get a little overwhelming at first, but remember, it's sort of a step-by-step process. Let's take a look now at depth studies. Once again, we're looking at the same time period, 1901 to 2000. The depth studies are a little different than the core studies in that they cover one particular topic, but very deeply, essentially looking at a subject and really drilling into that information. Depth Studies A is all about the First World War. Depth Studies B is about Germany, 1918 to 1945. C is Russia, 1905 to 1941. One of the things that you might notice is that some of these topics overlap a little bit. So when they do overlap, it's possible that even though we will be focusing on one depth studies, there will be a little bit of an overlap, which will help you have more diversity in answers for the different papers. We'll talk about that a little later on as well, though. D, United States, 1919 to 1941. China, 1930 to 1990. Look at that time length, 60 years. So as you can imagine, this covers a lot of different topics. South Africa, 1940 to 1995. And finally, Israelis and Palestinians since 1945. Now, as I mentioned, for the depth studies, we only have to choose one of these. And this year, I think we're going to be focusing on Germany, 1918 to 1945. But I would like everybody to try to pick up another one, perhaps during summer break, perhaps First World War, or if you have more of an interest in China or the United States. It's all up to you, essentially. Now, along with our syllabus, we have a textbook, which all of you will get. I also recommend the revision guide, which works hand in hand. One of the things that I always like to point out is that because the textbook is specifically designed for our course, the IGCSE, all the chapters in the book are the same as the depth studies and the core studies. So there's no other book that you will need. The other thing is that each of the different topics has what is called focus points. And as we look at the textbook, we can follow specifically what the syllabus asks and what the textbooks will give us. And these two come together very nicely so you can follow the topic page by page as we go through the book. When we're looking at core studies and depth studies, we'll be looking at specific topics, questions that require analysis, and we also will be understanding how each part of this individual story is a part of a larger story. Now, let's get into the assessments. For component number 1, or paper number 1, this is an examination that will last for 2 hours, and you as a candidate actually get to choose which questions to answer. Now, what I mean by that is that questions essentially are on different topics. And if you know a topic a little bit better than another topic, then you can choose to answer those questions. So one of the things that's nice, especially as I mentioned with the depth studies, is that if you look at Germany and China, or perhaps you're interested in World War I, when you get into the assessment, you have more choices on which questions you like to answer, and that can often make for a stronger paper. For this paper, you answer 2 questions related to the core studies and 1 question related to the depth studies. For paper number 1, questions are designed to focus on what are known as A, B, and C. A questions are detailed answers, B questions are analysis, and C questions are opinions. As our diagram points out, and we'll have a separate video on this alone, As you go up the pyramid, the questions become more complex, and thus that is why you can get up to 4 points for a detailed answer, 6 marks for analysis, and opinion questions can be up to 10 marks. But like I said, essentially we'll have a separate video which will be all about just tackling paper number 1. Paper number 2 is very similar in that it is a 2-hour examination and that it focuses on the core studies. However, what is different about paper number 2 is that it's all about source analysis. Now you might be asking, what are sources? There are different types of sources. They can be in the form of a political cartoon, a photograph, a primary source such as a letter from a person who lived during the time period, or it can be a secondary source, one written many years after the historical events. As we go through this particular program, we'll be spending a lot of time looking at sources to better understand history, and this particular paper focuses just on sources. So it's a lot of fun to be able to look at these different pieces of history and try to make sense of them. With paper number 2, candidates do not choose which questions they answer. You are given 6 questions and you have to answer all of them. One of the things that is nice, however, is that Cambridge always announces what the topic of the paper will be long in advance. So, for example, those who are taking the IGCSE program in 2018, the topic will be, to what extent was the League of Nations a success? If you're taking the IGCSE in 2019, the topic will be, how effectively did the United States contain the spread of communism? Now, paper number 3 is optional, and currently our school doesn't actually offer this. But I just want to point out what it is in case you're interested. Essentially, candidates look at a particular depth studies and they work hand in hand with the people at Cambridge to write an extended essay on that topic. And then you work with your teacher in the classroom and after class perhaps to develop an idea, and then you send that paper to Cambridge where it is analyzed. As I mentioned, our school doesn't particularly have this option at the moment, so it's not something that you would probably do. However, just important to know that it does exist. Let's focus on component number 4, or paper number 4. That's the one that you will more than likely be tackling. It is a 1-hour public exam. You answer one question. Candidates get to choose which question they answer. And it is an extended essay, meaning that it goes beyond just having 1 or 2 paragraphs. It is a fully developed introduction, evidence, and conclusion. Let's get to our last point, which is evaluation. Component number 1 has up to 60 marks. The 60 marks you get for 3 questions at 20 each, and it represents 40% of your overall grade. Component number 2, which is the source analysis, is 50 marks and is 33% of your overall grade. Remember, we don't do component number 3 at our school. We will be focusing on component number 4, and it makes up 27%. So 27 plus 33 plus 40 is 100 marks. Now, I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but I think it may be important to look at this last aspect of evaluation. Cambridge essentially develops assessment objectives into 3 different categories: recall, select, organize. cause, consequence, similarities, and differences. And then finally, interpret, evaluate, and source analysis. These are the three main ideas that we will be focusing on in our history class. For each of the different papers, there are different percentages. For example, for paper number 1, you get 20 of your 60 marks in that base information, the recall. However, you might notice that in component number 2, the percentage is much lower. Cause and consequence and similarities and difference makes up 40 marks in paper number 1 and no marks in paper number 2, and 25 and 25 for the third and fourth papers. And then finally, our interpret, evaluate, and source analysis. As it's no surprise, the main points that you can get are on that paper number 2. So this is the rough breakdown of how you will be assessed by Cambridge. Notice, if we will, for just a second, to look at that first assessment objective. This is basic recall of the history. Even if you can remember all the facts, you only get 20 marks, 10 marks, and 15 marks, which means that in order to really excel at this particular program, you have to be able to make those connections, learn how to do that analysis, be able to provide opinions, back it up, and especially for paper number 2, be able to look at sources, understand them, and interpret them. I hope that this has been a good introduction. Of course, we can always speak one-on-one if you have any more questions. And I hope that you will also spend a little time looking at the Cambridge website. I strongly recommend that you spend a little time on the Cambridge website. Remember to look for History 0470, and this will give you an overview of all the different things that the university has to offer. One of the big things that I would recommend is taking a look at the past papers. They're all in PDF form, so you can download them. Paper 1-1, which is located right here, is a sample paper 1 that was given in 2005. This is a paper 2, and this is a paper 4. This is an excellent way to better familiarize yourself with the way that the questions will be asked. So, once again, use the website for all the resources and updates as they come available.